Everyone now, they look back and they're like, what happened to your sweet image that you used to be? And I'm like, then when I came out, you thought I was too provocative. It's like you can never win. No matter what you do, at the end of the day, you can't please everybody. You know, I'm not here to please.
Making music to making out with Madonna. How far is too far?
Did you say something to her about the Madonna thing? Is it a lesbian chic thing?
And now, 6 years later, she's still constantly feeding the publicity monster. As much as she seeks the attention, her family is still her constant.
It just keeps getting worse for Britney Spears. After rehab and months of court fights with her ex, Kevin Federline, a judge ruled Spears has to give up custody of her 2 little boys.
In some ways, she's like a laboratory experiment in the insulating power of relentless fame.
It's really weird, like I enjoy my life and I love what I do, but at the same time, even though we didn't have that much then, I was really happy. Like I'm looking back right now, just the simplicity of life, it was very nice.
On Wednesday, June 23rd of 2021, Britney Spears addressed Judge Brenda Penny via telephone about what was really going on behind the scenes in her conservatorship.
A good job at exploiting my life. He immediately the next day put me on lithium. I worked 7 days a week, no days off, which in California, the only similar thing to this is called sex trafficking. Making anyone work against their will, taking all their possessions away.
I would love to have a family. That would be when I'm the most content. My kids and just, I mean, they become your life. It's not all about you anymore, and you have a focus that's so beautiful.
Britney Spears is the millennial generation's equivalent to Marilyn Monroe. I don't know fully how to explain it, but I think a lot of you guys know exactly what I mean when I say that, right? Like everything from her public perception to the way that the media has tried to be overly speculative about her life, to the major cultural impact that she's had on such a generation of people and the symbolism that has gone along with her and the way she has defined pop culture for an entire set of decades. They even have a scary amount in common, like both being unnatural blondes and both having the middle name Jean. A lot of things about them are just very similar, and to me it feels like it can't be completely coincidental that Elton John, known for his song Candle in the Wind about the sad downfall of Marilyn Monroe and her life, was the person to encourage Britney to return to music last year when they released their collaborative song together. I don't know, that's just something that I was thinking about as I read Britney's new memoir, The Woman in Me, which just came out on October 24th, 2023. Today, we are going to be reviewing that memoir in depth. We're going to be taking a look at some passages from the book and talking about what we can understand better about Britney Spears, the life that she had, the people who wronged her and the things she did wrong herself, and all of that together, and what we should take away about what it means to be a highly respected but also highly scrutinized woman in the entertainment industry. Let's do it. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome for the first time. My name is Savvy and this is Savvy Writes Books, and today I have another book review for you guys, but before we get into it, please don't forget to subscribe. I put out new videos about books, business, general commentary topics, breaking down the book publishing industry and things like that. I put out new videos like that every week, so you guys won't want to miss those. Also, because today's video doesn't have a sponsor, I want to give an extra focus on saying thank you to my Patreon supporters. Their names are up on the screen. You can check out my Patreon page in the description below, and in that description below you will also see linked my $5 a month and up Patreon supporters who can promote their own links in the description below, so please check them out and give them some love as well. And if you're interested in getting more of a behind the scenes look at what I do on my Patreon page, I have tons of blog posts taking you behind the scenes of my life as a writer, giving out writing advice, talking about how I write my own books, talking about how I produce my videos, having some access to live streams about current trending topics and things like that. So if any of that interests you, go ahead and check out the Patreon as well. But with all of that said, let's get into the review of Britney's new highly sought after memoir, The Woman in Me. Now, normally when I go into a discussion of a celebrity memoir, first I do sometimes like to check and see if there was a ghostwriter. Not that it makes that big of a difference, but I do want to talk about the ghostwriter real quick before we get too into it. Probably a majority of celebrity memoirs are ghostwritten, the reason being that most celebrities aren't famous for being writers. They're usually famous for being musicians or actors or usually in some other creative creative field, whereas we know that writing, literature, all of that is its own specific skill, its own specific field. So often celebrities or their publishing companies or their agents will hire a ghostwriter to write their memoir for them. Honestly, this has never bothered me. I know some people are kind of bothered by it, but I think in the end it makes for a better book. Ghostwriting can be a very profitable field for authors to go into, especially journalists, especially nonfiction writers. And it works out really well because they get paid really well for their work. They get paid really well to write, which is the thing that they do best, and the celebrity gets to have their story told in a way that resonates with an audience, and it works out for the consumer because the customer gets to read a book that is well written, that is coherent, all of that. So overall, I am in favor of ghostwriting as a practice, as long as everyone is compensated fairly, as long as everyone is credited to the extent that they want to be credited. I know in the past when I talked about like Jill Duggar's memoir, for example, she does give credit to the ghostwriter right there on the cover of the book. A lot of celebrities do this. They say, written by this celebrity with this person. Now on this book, there was no credit given to the ghostwriter. But again, if the ghostwriter is consenting to, I don't need credit for this. I'm not here for credit. I am here to make money on a writing project and to help this story come to life. Again, I think that's all up to the writers and the publishers. So I was looking up who is the ghostwriter for this book. While there isn't a specific ghostwriter credited, I did find a couple articles claiming that the ghostwriter seems to be speculated at least to be someone named Sam Lanksy. So here's an article from The Independent called Sam Lanksy, the ghostwriter who helped bring Britney's troubled story to the page. American journalist and author Sam Lanksy has reportedly helped to shape Britney's globally anticipated memoir, The Woman in Me. Having written a book about his turbulent teen years and interviewed A-listers from Adele to Madonna, he's well placed to shepherd the star's story. Many know that behind almost every celebrity memoir is a ghostwriter, the spectral hand that rests on a subject's pen, gently gliding them in the literary ways beyond their actor, singer, politician, athlete remit. For a star as bright as Spears and a story as sensitive as hers, you might expect to find a veteran behind the byline, J.R. Moringer, aka Prince Harry perhaps, Joni Rogers, aka Paris Hilton, Hillary Lifton, Tatum O'Neal, or Ariel Levy, Demi Moore. Instead, Spears is said to have selected Sam Lanksy, journalist, novelist, and as far as we know, first-time ghostwriter. The article then goes on to detail the ways that Sam Lanksy has made a name for himself in the world of nonfiction writing, even writing his own memoir when he was young about all of the trauma that he went through as a teenager. And because of the ways that he's been able to handle writing about trauma, and specifically trauma starting in the teen years in the past, he seemed like someone who would be able to accurately handle Britney's story, which as we know is going to contain quite a lot of trauma in it. So a warning before we go into the specifics of Britney's story, this story will contain a lot of discussions of specific traumas that Britney went through. If you are here in the first place, you probably know at least a little bit about Britney Spears. You probably know that just last year she was freed from a 13-year conservatorship that she was under that a lot of people have equated to conditions similar to human trafficking. A lot of you guys probably know the ways that she was sexualized in the media when she was underage, a lot of the traumas that she went through from that. This book will contain discussions of all of that in addition to discussions of other topics like pregnancy trauma, termination of pregnancy, postpartum depression, mental health struggles, substance abuse, all of that type of stuff you will find in this book. So just know that going into it, and know that some of those topics will be brought up when we discuss the specific passages from the book as well. So I listened to this book as an audiobook, and then I also got the Kindle version so that I could screenshot a few quotes so that we could pop them up on the screen throughout this video. I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook version. Funnily enough, it was narrated by Michelle Williams, who has also played Marilyn Monroe before. I just think that these connections, they keep forging themselves. It's very funny. But Michelle Williams did a fantastic job narrating this book. She got the emotions down perfectly. If you're gonna listen to the audiobook, highly recommend it. I think Michelle Williams did such a wonderful job narrating it. And it was really nice to listen to the audiobook also because I took my dog Chewy on a 5-mile walk along Lake Michigan. We just went up to the lake, we went down multiple beaches, we had such a lovely time, the weather was beautiful, and we just listened to the audiobook together. That's my favorite thing to do, is just listen to audiobooks while walking with my dog. So that's how I listened to this book, and I do recommend it. I think it was fantastic. So this book starts off talking about Britney's childhood. It talks about, her life growing up in Louisiana, and from the get-go, we do have a lot of childhood trauma right from the beginning. We learn about how she's come from kind of a long line of abusers, specifically abusive men. We learn about her grandparents, about the ways that her grandparents put pressure on her father, and then that turned into her father putting pressure on her. We get that generational trauma right there from the start. We learn of her parents' constant marital struggles. As a lot of us probably know, Britney's parents, Jamie Spears, her dad, and her mom, Lynn Spears, the two of them got divorced in 2002, and then a few years later ended up actually getting back together. But Britney talks about her childhood being very turbulent, with the two of them constantly fighting, and the ways that especially her dad's alcoholism played into that conflict, the way that he was always drinking. She felt like she was always kind of having to watch out for him because if he was drinking, she didn't really know what to expect. We got some trauma from the very beginning, but similar to what I liked about Jill Duggar's memoir, along with the childhood trauma, we also get some of those good times. Because when you're painting a full picture of someone's childhood, it's not going to be all good or all bad. And even if you are talking about a childhood that is full of trauma and abuse, you also want to make sure that you bring in those good times so that you can make the story feel well-rounded and complete. And because it paints a more realistic picture of what trauma is like, it could be very easy for someone to think about their own life and say, well, you know, sometimes I have good times, so maybe the situation I'm in isn't really abuse or isn't really trauma. But when you see it playing out in a similar way to how you might see it in your own life, it becomes a lot more human, it becomes a lot more real. So I liked that we got, you know, examples of things Britney loved about being in the South, about growing up in Louisiana, going to crawfish boils and having big parties in the backyard with all the neighbors and things like that. I thought that it was nice to get those moments as well. Part of the reason I mentioned the ghostwriter earlier is that when I review a celebrity memoir that does have a ghostwriter, I don't usually go that deep into the writing. I know with Prince Harry's memoir, because J.R. Moringer did a really good job with a lot of the writing in that, I did break that down a little bit more. And in Jeanette McCurdy's book, I don't believe that one was ghostwritten. I believe Jeanette McCurdy did write I'm Glad My Mom Died herself. So I talked a lot about the writing, the verb choices, the verb tense choices, the structure, all of that, because that was a big part of her choices in telling her own story. When a book is ghostwritten, a lot of times the writing is just more upfront, it's more direct. It just tells you point A to point B because it really is a writer conveying someone else's story that they've listened to hours and hours of interviews with them for, that they've sat down with them and had them tell them their story directly. So there isn't usually as much to break down in terms of the writing itself, just because that's not really Britney's writing. What verb choices she chose or what tense she chose to write in or what perspective she used here or there doesn't necessarily equate to what she was thinking, because that's often the ghostwriter's choice rather than hers. And in this case, similar to with Jill Duggar's memoir, the writing is pretty to the point and upfront. It's not that flowery or excessive or anything like that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I do want to say one mild criticism I had was that towards the beginning of the book, we skipped around in time in a way that I was unclear when Britney's family was struggling financially and when they weren't. And I think that that is a pretty important piece of the story to know, because a big theme throughout the book is how Britney eventually became responsible for being the breadwinner for her entire family, even when she was a minor, which is, as we know, one of the hugest, most abusive and exploitative things that happens to children that go into the entertainment industry young. Huge problem. And there are times that she talks about how her family was extremely poor. Her dad was an entrepreneur, but he was also always drinking, and the two of them were always fighting, and money was always an issue. It was one of the main things they were fighting for. But with Britney's career success, suddenly they became wealthy. But there were also moments in the beginning parts of the book when it talked about Britney's dad starting up some restaurants in Louisiana and owning some gyms and owning some businesses and things like that, and how he became a wealthy guy in their neighborhood. And then as a result, they were able to host a lot of big crawfish boils in their backyard and have a really cool house that all the neighbors liked. So I wasn't clear at what point were Britney's dad's businesses successful, at what point did they fail so that then she needed to be the breadwinner. Just the storytelling wasn't very linear there, and I was a little bit confused as to what happened exactly where. So maybe that was just me. Maybe I was just too enamored with the beautiful landscape of the Chicago lakefront while I was listening to the audiobook that somehow I missed something. That was something that I was a little bit like, okay, that could have been a little clearer. Maybe the journalist should have dug a little deeper when asking interview questions so that we got a clearer picture of what was going on there. But beyond that, I did think that the beginning of the story was really interesting. We learned a lot about Britney's life, from how she was, you know, always entering herself in competition. She would go on Star Search. She auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club. She didn't make it the first time, but then the second time she auditioned, she made it because she was a little older and more experienced and had been doing some theater performances. You really saw kind of step by step how she went from local performances, winning local talent competitions and singing contests, and then taking the next step. And you really got to see that slow and steady rise to stardom, even though it was objectively very fast since she was a mega star by the time she was 15 years old. We also get a lot of cases of Britney very early on being taken advantage of sexually by much older men, and that kind of leads into the exploitation of her body and the objectification of her that we see in the media that she tries to own on her own terms but also fight back against when it's on someone else's terms. And I thought that was a really interesting discussion. There's a really strong discussion of gender dynamics in this book and the ways that Hollywood and the entertainment industry in general really treats male celebrities and female celebrities different, and we are definitely going to get into all of that. Early on in Britney's career, even when she's still a minor, there's always these discussions about the outfits that she's wearing and whether the outfits she's wearing are appropriate or whether they're a good influence on teen girls or whatever. So here's one quote from the book that I think really drove that home. It says, "MTV sat me down in front of a monitor and made me watch strangers in Times Square give their opinions of my performance. Some of them said I did a good job, but an awful lot of them seemed to be focused on my having worn a skimpy outfit. They said I was dressing too sexy and thereby setting a bad example for kids. The cameras were trained on me, waiting to see how I would react to this criticism, if I would take it well or if I would cry. Did I do something wrong, I wondered? I just danced my heart out on the awards show. I never said I was a role model. All I wanted to do was sing and dance." The MTV show host kept pushing. "What did I think of the commenters telling me I was corrupting America's youth? Finally, I said, some of them were very sweet, but I'm not the children's parents. I just gotta be me. I know there are going to be people out there. I know not everyone's gonna like me." It shook me up, and it was my first real taste of backlash that would last years. It felt like every time I turned on an entertainment show, yet another person was taking shots at me saying I wasn't authentic. I was never quite sure what all these critics thought I was supposed to be doing. A Bob Dylan impression? I was a teenage girl from the South. I signed my name with a heart. I liked looking cute. Why did everyone treat me, even when I was a teenager, like I was dangerous? Meanwhile, I started to notice more and more older men in the audience, and sometimes it would freak me out to see them leering at me like I was some kind of Lolita fantasy for them, especially when no one could seem to think of me as both sexy and capable, or talented and hot. If I was sexy, they seemed to think I must be stupid. If I was hot, I couldn't possibly be talented. I wish back then I'd known the Dolly Parton joke. I'm not offended by all the dumb blonde jokes because I know I'm not dumb and I'm not blonde. And then that's where we learned that Britney's natural hair color is black. I didn't know that. I thought she was a natural blonde this whole time, but apparently she naturally has dark hair. She and Dolly Parton, Marilyn Monroe, all of them not natural blondes. I'm an unnatural blonde too. This is not natural blonde hair. So I will join in that wonderful club with great company of dyed blonde hair. There were some places in this book that I thought that the writing was really good and really interesting and really detailed. And again, because there was a ghostwriter, I thought that these were moments when he definitely got enough of the information and he was able to convey it in a way that was interesting. I know when we read and reviewed Jamie Lynn's book on this channel about 2 years ago now, one of the big issues I had with that book was that Jamie Lynn's book was not detailed enough. There were just huge chunks of information missing. There were just huge summaries of massive events that were happening without ever putting us in the scene, without ever making us feel like we knew what was going on in the moment, or we could feel the emotions that Jamie was feeling, or any of that. And as a result, it made the book feel untrustworthy, like she was just leaving in big gaps of information and trying to leave things out. I will link that video in the description below if you guys haven't seen my review of Jamie Lynn's book yet. But that was one of the biggest issues I had with that book, and I don't know if that book was ghostwritten or not, if Jamie Lynn wrote it herself and just did a bad job, or if she had a ghostwriter and just refused to tell the ghostwriter the full story on things. I don't know. A lot of that book felt very incomplete. This book had some really good examples of taking us in the moment, showing us what Britney was feeling in a certain moment, what she was experiencing in a sensory kind of way. So here's an example. It talks about one of her iconic performances, you know, when she had that snake. She was performing on stage with the big snake. So here's where it said, "All I knew was to look down because it felt like if I looked up and caught its eye, it would kill me. In my head, I was saying, just perform, just use your legs and perform. But what nobody knows is that as I was singing, the snake brought its head right around to my face, right up to me, and started hissing at me. You didn't see that shot on the TV, but in real life, I was thinking, are you fucking serious right now? This fucking goddamn snake's tongue is flicking out at me right now." Finally, I got to the part where I handed it back, thank God. I thought that was a nice moment where we got to see the fear that was going on with her. We got a glimpse into what she was feeling while she was performing. A lot of us remember seeing that performance on TV, but we didn't know what was going through her head at the time. And it's nice to see what's going through the famous person's head in these moments that we all remember as like a cultural milestone. Because for a lot of us, celebrities don't always feel human. They feel like something that's there for us to watch, that's there for the public to consume. But then when we see like someone saying, yes, I remember that moment and I had a completely different perspective on it, I think that those moments really help show the celebrity as a whole rounded, real person. So warning, we're about to go into some pregnancy related trauma, specifically regarding her relationship with Justin Timberlake. Now, I know that this was one of the biggest headlines to come out about this book. Oh my God, it was revealed that this thing happened in Britney and Justin's relationship. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to give some context for all that, but just know going into it that we're about to talk about that. So if you're not comfortable with that, you might want to skip ahead a few minutes. A lot of us remember that Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake were in a relationship for a long time. A lot of people thought that they were going to get married to each other. The late 90s and early 2000s was all about Britney and Justin. We always remember those iconic denim outfits. She even talks about those in the book, about how they thought that the denim outfits were funny when they put them on, and they were glad to see that people enjoyed looking at them. I liked those moments. So Britney and Justin's relationship was on and off for a long time. I believe he was actually her first kiss, and it was back when they were like 13 years old in the Mickey Mouse Club together, and so they had the childhood friends to lovers thing going on. A lot of people liked them together, but then when they were, I think, 20 years old or so, they ended up splitting up, and that breakup caused a lot of drama, as we know. So when Britney was about 19 or 20 years old, she ended up accidentally getting pregnant while in a relationship with Justin. And one thing that's very common throughout this book, and that is also true if you look at old interviews of Britney and things like that, throughout her entire life, she has always wanted to have kids.
I would love to have a family. That would be when I'm the most content with my kids, and just, I mean, they become your life. It's not all about you anymore, and you have a focus that's so beautiful.
She's always wanted to be a mother. Family's very important to her. She's always wanted to have her own family. And so when she got pregnant at, I believe, 19 or 20 years old, she was like, okay, this is a little early for me. I wasn't ready to be a mom just yet, but you know what? I'm willing to do this because I do want to be a mom. Meanwhile, Justin was like, ooh, I am really not ready to be a father. I really don't want to do this. So they eventually came to the decision that she would terminate the pregnancy. She didn't really want to, but they came to that choice. But what was especially disturbing about this situation was that they didn't go to a doctor for it. And I think this is one of the moments where we see how celebrities are treated different than other humans. Because if you remember at this time, which I believe was like 2000 or 2001, if you remember this time, everyone was very obsessed with female celebrities and what they did with their bodies. If a female celebrity terminated a pregnancy, it was going to be all over the headlines, and that was all they were going to talk about. And then you'd have, Rush Limbaugh getting on the radio to talk about what a slut she was or something like that. Like, that's the kind of thing that would happen at that time. Nowadays, it's still controversial, but especially back then, it would have been complete fodder to ruin her career potentially. So she could not have any record that she had done this. So instead of going to a hospital, her assistant ended up getting her some do-it-yourself from home medication. So she did this DIY, which is usually very unsafe. So it was kind of traumatizing to read this, but here's what the book said. It was important that no one find out about the pregnancy or the termination thereof, which meant doing everything at home. We didn't even tell my family. The only person who knew besides Justin and me was Felicia, that was her assistant, who was always on hand to help me. I was told it might hurt a little bit, but you'll be fine. On the appointed day, with only Felicia and Justin there, I took the little pills. Soon, I started having excruciating cramps. I went into the bathroom and stayed there for hours, lying on the floor, sobbing and screaming. They should have numbed me with something, I thought. I wanted some kind of anesthesia. I wanted to go to the doctor. I was scared. I lay there wondering if I was going to die. When I tell you what was painful, I can't begin to describe it. The pain was unbelievable. I went down to the ground on my knees, holding the toilet. For a long time, I couldn't move. To this day, it's one of the most agonizing things I have ever experienced in my life. Still, they didn't take me to the hospital. Justin came into the bathroom and lay on the floor with me. At some point, he thought maybe music would help, so he got his guitar and lay there with me, strumming it. Britney was really on the floor, going through the greatest pain of her life, and Justin popped in to go, anyway, here's Wonderwall. Justin literally came in like the Ryan Gosling version of Ken to sing Matchbox 20. What? So we learn more and more about Britney and Justin's relationship and how eventually it ended. There's a point where Britney feels sad after her relationship with Justin ends because, as the book says, she felt closer to Justin's family than to her own. She often was feeling around this time like her parents really wanted to use her for money and really were pushing her into this career more and more, and that she was being used as more of a cash cow than anything. Whereas in her relationship with Justin, she felt like his family more accepted her as the person that she was and cared about her as a human being. And that's what she said in the book. But again, that's a place where I wish that the ghostwriter or maybe Britney in interviews had gone more in depth, because we never really see a scene of Britney interacting with Justin's family in the book. We never see a scene of maybe Justin's mom being there to comfort Britney when her own mom wasn't or something. I would have liked to have seen a scene of that type of thing happening, just so that we as the reader can actually feel that we can feel that difficult loss of not just the relationship, but also being cut off from Justin's family as well. So that's a place where I think the writing could have been a little more specific also. But in the wake of her breakup with Justin starts writing music that Britney's pretty sure is about her. He starts doing music videos where he casts women who look a lot like her to play the woman who broke his heart, and starts kind of turning the public perception against her. In this case, I don't have the best opinion of Justin Timberlake, but I also don't feel like, I don't know him as a person. I don't know his side of the story, so I'm not going to be here to demonize him. But I will say that within the context of this book, and also within other things we've seen in pop culture, Justin Timberlake, by way of being a man, has seemed to have gotten away with a lot of things that a lot of women haven't gotten away with, and it seems that he's always kind of had an unfair advantage. Just look at the 2004 Super Bowl incident that he had with Janet Jackson, where you guys remember that whole thing? Here's a funny story about the 2004 Super Bowl. I was 11 years old and I was at my friend's house for a Super Bowl party, and all the kids during the halftime show were just like, let's go play video games. So we were playing like Spyro the Dragon on PlayStation, and we were having a blast playing Spyro when all the adults were like, oh my god, Janet Jackson's nipple. I never saw it on TV because I was busy playing video games, but I remember the 2004 Super Bowl because all the adults suddenly got all up in arms about it. But after that, basically, Janet Jackson was constantly hounded by the media. People were like, that's your body on display. Oh my god, you exposed yourself. She basically took all the blame for that when it later then came out that Justin was at fault for not having attended all of their practices, so he messed up the dance move in that moment, and that's what caused her wardrobe malfunction, and he got none of the blame for this whatsoever. It was just ridiculous. So there's just a common thread of like Justin Timberlake constantly not getting the blame, and all of the blame in every situation being put on the woman. And that's not me saying that Justin Timberlake is a terrible person. I don't know him personally or anything like that, but it is me saying that, like, I think he's been unfairly privileged in these situations. Britney talks about how she and Justin had both cheated on each other in the relationship. The way she makes it sound is that he did a lot more than she did. She just made out with another guy once, and he was a lot more physically intimate with multiple other women. Their relationship had some issues with infidelity. Britney was still pretty traumatized from, one, Justin having cheated on her. From what she'd heard, it was at least 2 or 3 other women that he had cheated with. So she was very surprised when he started putting out music about how Britney had broken his heart and had betrayed him and had done all of this stuff, where she's like, wait, it seems like you're just trying to make yourself look like the good guy in the public. Here's what the book says. Justin was preparing to release his solo album, Justified. On 2020, he played an unreleased song for Barbara Walters called Don't Go, Horrible Woman, that seemed to be about me. I thought our love was so strong. I guess I was dead wrong. But look at it positively. Hey girl, at least you gave me a song about another horrible woman. Less than a month later, he released the video for his song Cry Me a River, in which a woman who looks like me cheats on him and he wanders around sad in the rain. In the news media, I was described as a harlot who'd broken the heart of America's golden boy. The truth? I was comatose in Louisiana and he was happily running around Hollywood. May I just say that on his explosive album and in all the press that surrounded it, Justin neglected to mention the several times he'd cheated on me. There's always been more leeway in Hollywood for men than women, and I see how men are encouraged to talk trash about women in order to become famous and powerful, but I was shattered. And I think this is a really important point. We're going to go into later the ways that this thread of sexism continues to build throughout the story until we get to the point where ultimately in Britney's conservatorship, she's realizing that a lot of the ways that she's targeted in this conservatorship are specifically sexist, like having her fertility challenged and things like that. Having things about her mental state be chalked up to old school sexist stereotypes that men who have similar mental illnesses have been able to get away with and things like that. So I really like that the book thoroughly addresses this line of sexism throughout. So then we learn about Britney's relationship with Kevin. Kevin is her ex-husband, the man that she had 2 children with. Britney's so excited to be pregnant. She's so excited that they're married and that they're gonna have a kid together. And she talks about how during her first pregnancy, she was very hormonal. She says 2 things about being pregnant: I loved sex and I loved food. Both of those things were absolutely amazing throughout both of my pregnancies. Other than that, I can't say there was much that brought me any pleasure. I was so mean. You did not want to hear from me in these 2 years. So it's 2 years because she has 2 kids, one right after the other. So she spends the better part of 2 years being pregnant. And then she talks about something that, if you guys remember when we reviewed Jamie Lynn's book, Jamie Lynn talked about being on the set of Zoe 101 and how much she hated Alexa Nicholas, her co-star on Zoe 101, and how she thought Alexa Nicholas was always bullying her and she hated this girl so much, and she got Britney to show up and basically tell off Alexa Nicholas, and Alexa ended up crying and eventually left the show. And Alexa has since spoken out and said, like, no dude, Jamie Lynn was bullying me all the time, and then she got Britney to bully me. It was awful. So Britney actually addresses that in this book and apologizes for it. She says, I was protective over Jamie Lynn too. After she complained to me about a co-star of hers on a TV show, I showed up on the set to have words with the actress. What I must have looked like: hugely pregnant, yelling at a teenage, and I would later learn, innocent girl. Are you spreading rumors about my sister? To that young actress, I'm sorry. So thank you, Britney. Justice for Alexa Nicholas right there. I thought this book had a lot of really good introspection on what it means to be famous, what it means to be put out there as a star for public consumption versus what it means to get to be your own person and get to reclaim, I guess as the title says, the woman in me, to get to be the actual just human that you are inside versus the outside version of you that the world wants to consume as a product. Britney says, some celebrities handle fame well. They have perspective. They had fun being admired, but not too much fun. They know whose opinion to listen to and whose opinion to ignore. Getting awards and trophies is cool, and in the beginning, those first 2 years when you become a celebrity, well, it's a feeling you can't explain. I think some people are great at fame. I'm not. My first 2 or 3 years, I was good at it, and it was fine, but my real self, in school, I was a basketball player. I didn't cheerlead. I didn't want to be out there. I played ball. That's what I loved. But fame, that world isn't real, my friends. It's not real. You go along with it because, of course, it's going to pay the family's bills and everything, but for me, there was an essence of real life missing from it. I think that's why I had my babies. So getting awards and all that fame stuff, I liked it a lot, but there's nothing lasting in it for me. What I love is sweat on the floor during rehearsals, or just playing ball and making a shot. I like the work. I like practicing. That has more authenticity and value than anything else. And I think that this line was really important, this whole section, because we get a sense here and also throughout other places in the book of what Britney truly values, which first is music for the joy of music, music for the feeling that she gets when she's producing something beautiful, dancing for the joy of dancing, for the feeling of accomplishment when she's perfected a new dance move or hit a new note or been able to produce a new song. That and family and having children. Those are the things that to Britney are most important, the things she values the most. It always comes from her creating something, leaving something behind, being able to be creative in making a new song or performing on stage, or being able to put a new child into the world and protect that child and be there for them. Britney is all about what she can contribute. Whereas the fame, just like soaking in all the attention, that's not the part that she valued as much. She likes performing because she likes being able to share her music with other people, but the fame and the constant scrutiny, none of that was what she really wanted out of all of this, and it became to be what she didn't value and what she eventually wanted to move away from. And I really liked that moment of introspection on what it means to want to create something versus what it means for wanting to be known for wanting to create something. We also learn how awful the press was to her, which is a very common theme throughout all these books, right? When we reviewed Jeanette McCurdy's book, Prince Harry's book, Jill Duggar's book, all these books have this common theme. People who get famous young have their whole lives put in the spotlight to the point that they can't get any privacy to themselves, and the press feels like they own them. So when Britney had her kids, the press was just all over that. They just wanted to harass her all the time. So in talking about her postpartum depression that she went through, a lot of it came from feeling constantly on edge that these kids couldn't be protected because the press, the media were always going to be after them. She says, "I was a little depressed once I was no longer keeping them safe inside my body. They seemed so vulnerable out in the world of jockeying paparazzi and tabloids. I wanted them back inside me so the world couldn't get at them. Why is Britney so camera shy with Jaden?" one headline read. Kevin and I had gotten better at hiding the kids after Jaden was born, so much so that people were wondering why no pictures of him had been released. I think if anyone had thought about that question for a second, they could have come up with some guesses, but no one was really asking the question. They just kept acting like I owed it to them to let the men who kept trying to catch me looking fat take photos of my infant sons. After each birth, one of the first things I had to do was look out the window to count the number of enemy combatants in the parking lot. They just seemed to multiply every time I checked. There were always more cars than seemed safe. To see that many men gathering to shoot photos of my babies, it made my blood run cold. With a whole lot of money in photo royalties on the line, it was their mission to get pictures of my boys at any cost. And my boys, they were so tiny, it was my job to keep them safe. How ridiculous is that? Dude, nobody should feel obligated to share their children with the public. I don't care how famous you are. Those are your children. Those children did not consent to being in the public eye. Like, we need to stop demanding pictures. Like, I even see people doing this with YouTubers. Like, when some of my friends on YouTube have had babies, people are like, "Show me a picture of your baby. When do I get to see your baby?" It's like, bro, I don't know you. You do not get to see anyone's baby. What is wrong with you? It's such a weird and parasocial thing that's been going on for a while. And even back then, people were like, "Oh, this baby. This is our collective baby." No, that's Britney's baby. From here, we start to build towards the breakdown that Britney had in 2008. A lot of people remember how she shaved her head and she hit the car with the umbrella. There was that whole thing that eventually led into the conservatorship that she was then under for 13 years. We learn a little bit more about Britney's side of the story, about why she had this breakdown, and a lot of it came from the fact that she and Kevin were going through a really nasty divorce at the time. Both of them wanted full custody of the kids, so they were locked in a really nasty custody battle. It was difficult because everything was so high profile at the time, and they had to strategically plan what they could and couldn't say in court, what they could and couldn't tell their lawyers, because some headline would take something one of them said and twist it, so they had to be so strategic about the way they both went about fighting for custody. And then after a while, Kevin eventually was like, I got the kids, they're mine. And Britney was like, I want to see the kids. And Kevin was like, no, you don't get to see the kids. So now they're fighting over who gets to see the kids. Britney wants in any way possible to get to see the kids, and it makes her mental health really, really start to suffer. She says, in February, after not getting to see the boys for weeks and weeks, completely beside myself with grief, I went to plead to see them. Kevin wouldn't let me in. I begged him. Jaden James was 5 months old and Sean Preston was 17 months old. I imagine they're not knowing where their mother was, wondering why she didn't want to be with them. I wanted to get a battering ram to get to them. I didn't know what to do. The paparazzi watched it all happen. I can't describe the humiliation I felt. I was cornered. I was being chased, like always, by these men waiting for me to do something they could photograph. And so that night, I gave them some material. I went into a hair salon and I took the clippers and I shaved off all my hair. Everyone thought it was hilarious. Look how crazy she is. Even my parents acted embarrassed by me. But nobody seemed to understand that I was simply out of my mind with grief. My children had been taken away from me. And then from there, she talks about how the reactions to her head being shaved and stuff wasn't like, oh no, Britney must be going through something really difficult. We should have empathy for her. Instead, people were like, oh, she's not pretty now. Which again, the objectification of women in Hollywood and all of that, common theme throughout this book. It says, with my head shaved, everyone was scared of me, even my mom. No one would talk to me anymore because I was too ugly. My long hair was a big part of what people liked. I knew that. I knew a lot of guys thought long hair was hot. Shaving my head was a way of saying to the world, fuck you. You want me to be pretty for you? Fuck you. You want me to be good for you? Fuck you. You want me to be your dream girl? Fuck you. I'd been the dream girl for years. I'd smiled politely while TV show hosts leered at my breasts, while American parents said I was destroying their children by wearing a crop top, while executives patted my hand condescendingly and second-guessed my career choices, even though I'd sold millions of records, while my family acted like I was evil, and I was tired of it. At the end of the day, I didn't care. All I wanted to do was see my boys. It made me sick thinking about the hours, the days, the weeks I missed with them. My most special moments in life were taking naps with my children. That's the closest I've ever felt to God. Taking naps with my precious babies, smelling their hair, holding their tiny hands. So again, this is this conflict of Britney being like, I just want to get to be a mom at this point. I've done enough for the public. I don't owe people anything. I want to be a mom. I want to spend time with my boys. Nobody's letting me do that. And so yeah, I'm not going to be pretty for you anymore. And now people are acting like I took something away from them. I think that's valid. I think Britney is a very beautiful woman, and even with her head shaved, she looked fantastic. And I think shaved heads look very good on some women. They don't look good on me. I shaved my head once. It was not a good look. Then we get into the conservatorship stuff, which is just wow. it's just wow. So we learn about how Britney's dad, it seems from her recollection of this in the book, and from what I personally think happened as well, her dad seemed to see a financial opportunity in this conservatorship, especially when he started working with Louise Taylor from TriStar Entertainment. It ended up being more of a financial deal than anything, but also had him being able to control Britney's life and essentially enslave her. And we're going to get into all of that in just a second. But what's especially wild is that I'm just extremely disgusted that he was even allowed to be named conservator in the first place, when if you go through the book, Britney's book and Jamie Lynn's book both, and these are books that kind of come from opposite sides of the aisle on this whole topic. Both books talk about Jamie Spears, the father, how awful his alcoholism was. Both Jamie Lynn and Britney in their memoirs have detailed extensively how abusive he was when he was drunk, how he'd disappear for days at a time when they were children, how he was a neglectful father, how he would go into these rages and fight with their mom when he was drunk. Both of them have basically pointed out, yeah, our dad was a terrible alcoholic. So in what universe did the courts of California think like, yeah, he should be in charge of everything. He should get to decide when Britney goes to rehab, but he should never have to send himself to rehab. Like, I don't get it. I don't get how this shit happens. But anyway, I'm glad it's being brought to light. So it says, my father had struck up a very close friendship with Louise Lou Taylor, who he worshipped. She was front and center during the implementation of the conservatorship that would later allow them to control and take over my career. Lou, who had just started a new company called TriStar Sports and Entertainment Group, was directly involved in calling the shots right before the conservatorship. At the time, she had few real clients. She basically used my name and hard work to build her company. So this whole deal seemed financial. Taking over someone's life, owning their work, forcing them to do things and forcing them into contracts to do something for someone else's financial benefit, even though that person is a human adult. Like, this is human trafficking. There's no other way about it. So it says, my dad was able to set up two forms of conservatorship, what's called conservatorship of the person and conservatorship of the estate. The conservator of the person is designated to control the details of the conservatee's life, like where they live, what they eat, whether they can drive a car, and what they can do day to day. Even though I begged the court to appoint literally anyone else, and I mean anyone off the street would have been better, my father was given the job, the same man who'd made me cry if I had to get in the car with him when I was a little girl because he talked to himself, and the court was told that I was demented and I wasn't even allowed to pick my own lawyer. So it also talks about how Britney was lied to, that you can't pick your own lawyer, you have to go with the state-appointed lawyer, and that it wasn't until she talked to another lawyer years later, and they were like, no, you're totally allowed to pick your own lawyer. That's when she got her own lawyer and was able to actually start fighting back and getting this dissolved, but it was people people lying to her about being able to pick her own lawyer. And I think that's just so extra manipulative because it doesn't matter how famous you are. Most of us don't have an understanding of the law and how the court system works and things like that. And this was also in the day before we were all like looking things up on the internet constantly. Like, yeah, it was 2008, but information wasn't just as widely spread and consumed, and we weren't as bombarded with it on social media as we are now. We have to keep in mind that it is completely plausible that she was told the wrong thing and she was manipulated into this situation. So now it's talking about how the conservatorship just started fully controlling her life in every way. On the rare occasion that I went out, like to my agent and Fred Cade's house for dinner, the security team would sweep through the house before I arrived to make sure there was no alcohol or any drugs, even Tylenol there. No one at the party was allowed to drink until I left. The other guests were all very good sports about it, but I sensed that the second I left was when the real party started. When someone wanted to date me, the security team who answered to my father would run a background check on him, make him sign an NDA, and even have him submit a blood test. So her father even gets say over who she dates. She can't even find like a solid ally in a romantic partner that can help her fight back against this together because her dad also legally gets to approve who she dates. And keep in mind, this starts when Britney's in her late 20s and goes until she's either like 39 or 40. So it's a lot. If you're asking why I went along with it, there's one very good reason. I did it for my kids. Because I played by the rules, I was reunited with my boys. It was an ecstatic experience to get to hold them again. When they fell asleep next to me that first night we had back together, I felt whole for the first time in months. I just stared at them sleeping and felt so lucky. To see them as much as possible, I did everything I could to appease Kevin. I paid his legal bills, plus child support, plus thousands more a month so the kids could come along with me on the circus tour. Within the same short period of time, I appeared on Good Morning America, did the Christmas tree lighting in Los Angeles, shot a segment for Ellen, and toured through Europe and Australia. But again, the question was nagging at me. If I was so sick that I couldn't make my own decisions, why did they think it was fine for me to be out there smiling and waving and singing and dancing in a million time zones a week? I'll tell you one good reason. The circus tour grossed more than $130 million. So yeah, this was financial. This was a way to exploit her for money. And then the book continues to talk about the ways that this is a strong gender discrepancy that we often see. She says other people, and by other people I mean men, were afforded that freedom. Male rockers were rolling in late to award shows and we thought it made them cooler. Male pop stars were sleeping with lots of women and that was awesome. When Justin cheated on me and acted sexy, it was seen as cute. But when I wore a sparkly bodysuit, I had Diane Sawyer making me cry on national television, MTV making me listen to people criticizing my costumes, and a governor's wife saying she wanted to shoot me. I looked up the Diane Sawyer interview and wow, is it disrespectful. Diane Sawyer was nasty to Britney. There are so many parts. I'll insert some clips.
With Madonna as her model, Britney Spears has upset a lot of mothers in this country, starting with the wife of the governor of Maryland, who appeared at an anti-violence rally and, well, listen to what she said.
Really, if I had an opportunity to shoot Britney Spears, I think I would.
Oh, that's horrible.
Well,
that's really bad.
Because of the example for kids and how hard it is to be a parent and keep all of this away from your kids.
Well, that's really sad that she said that. Ew.
I have to ask a couple of things about Justin.
Okay, of course.
He has gone on television and pretty much said, you broke his heart. You did something that caused him so much pain.
I think we're both really young, and it was kind of waiting to happen.
He's left the impression that you weren't faithful, that you betrayed the relationship.
I think everyone has a side to their story. Oh, this feels really awkward right now.
On a popular morning drive radio show in New York promoting his album, he has a kind of gleeful confession about their very private life.
Did you Britney Spears? Yes or no?
Oh, man.
Come on, man.
Okay, I did it. No,
There was like talk about what we did together and like really sexually and stuff, and I just felt very exploitive. But it's all good. Let's talk about something else.
The call he made about Crimea River, what lesson do you learn from that?
I guess to really look out for yourself.
We wondered, does she care what her old fans, those kids, think, for instance, about this?
So here's the definitive for the last time ever Madonna kiss, okay? You gave her a real kiss. Is this the way it happened?
She's like, well, maybe we should kiss her. I'm like, okay. All right. And we never really did it in rehearsal.
I mean, I know those two ladies don't really give a damn what I say, but I think it's irresponsible in a way. It's kind of tacky. in a way, because to say that I'm not responsible for the fact that there's, 11-year-olds watching this show.
I mean, I can't help that, and if the parents don't like them to see it, then change the channel. So, sorry.
Parts where Britney is like, I am uncomfortable talking about this, can we move on? And Diane's just like, no, actually, we need to talk about your body more. Like, it's so disgusting. If you're interviewing someone, talk to them about the thing they're famous for. Talk to Britney about her singing. Talk to her about, what she does to warm up before a show, how she first fell in love with music, what her vocal range is like. Like, interview her about that. Don't interview her about these things that objectify her and make her uncomfortable. That's so gross. She says, I'd been eyeballed so much growing up. I'd been looked up and down, had people telling me what they thought of my body since I was a teenager. Shaving my head and acting out were my ways of pushing back, but under the conservatorship, I was made to understand that those days were now over. I had to grow my hair out and get back into shape. I had to go to bed early and take whatever medication they told me to take. If I thought getting criticized about my body in the press was bad, it hurt even more from my own father. He repeatedly told me I looked fat and that I was going to have to do something about it. So every day I would put on my sweats and I would go to the gym. I would do little bits of creative stuff here and there, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. As far as my passion for singing and dancing, it was almost a joke at that point. Then it talks a lot about the ways that Britney's dad controlled what she was allowed to eat. But he basically wanted her to just be thin for public consumption, which is so disgusting. This is literally human trafficking. So anyway, Britney's controlled what she's allowed to eat. It says, when my father told me I couldn't have dessert, I felt that it was not just him telling me, but my family and my state, like I was not allowed legally to eat dessert because he said no. Eventually I started to ask myself, wait, where am I? Nothing really made sense anymore. And no matter how much I dieted and exercised, my father was always telling me I was fat. He put me on a strict diet. The irony is that we had a butler and extravagance, and I would beg him for real food. Sir, I would plead, can you please sneak a hamburger or ice cream to me? Ma'am, I'm sorry, he would say. I have strict orders from your father. So for 2 years, I ate almost nothing but chicken and canned vegetables. How disgusting is that? So there's a little more of the diet talk then after this, which is pretty disturbing to read, but just be warned that that's what we're going into, and here's what she says. A strict diet you've put yourself on is bad enough, but when someone is depriving you of food you want, that makes it worse. I felt like my body wasn't mine anymore. I would go to the gym and feel so out of my mind with this trainer telling me to do things with my body. I felt cold inside. I felt scared. I'll be honest, I was fucking miserable. And it didn't even work. The diet had the opposite effect of what my father wanted. I gained weight. Even though I wasn't eating as much, he made me feel so ugly and like I wasn't good enough. Maybe that's because of the power of your thoughts. Whatever you think you are, you become. I was so beaten down by all of it that I just surrendered. My mom seemed to go along with my dad's plan for me. It was always incredible to me that so many people felt comfortable talking about my body. It had started when I was young. Whether it was strangers in the media or within my own family, people seemed to experience my body as public property. That's the key here. Nobody's body is public property, okay? Someone being famous and someone creating something for you, creating music, creating a show, putting on something like that, that is something that they can do and you can pay to see. And if they don't want to do it, then you don't have to pay to see it. Like that's the whole thing. There should be freedom involved here. But the fact that Britney was put into this situation, it's so disgusting. Then there's this moment where Britney meets a hairdresser that almost serves a mentor role to her, but then when the father realizes that she's helping Britney get some freedom, he's like, you're gone. So it says, one hairdresser caught a glimpse of my schedule and she said, oh honey, what are you doing? She had 2 little girls and was very maternal. I liked her a lot. You think it's too much? I asked her. It's more than too much, she said. That's insane. She leaned in like she had a secret to tell me. Listen, she said, in order to be creative, you have to have room for play in your schedule. It helps ground you to have that time to yourself. Hell, to just stare at the wall if you want. People need that. It must have gotten back to my father what she'd said, because the next day someone else was doing my hair. I never saw that hairdresser again. That moment hit me especially hard. This hairdresser is the unsung hero of this story, okay? What she said about how in order to be creative, we need time to experiment, to be playful, to be able to just let our minds wander and to be able to think of new ideas in the first place, that is absolutely true. If you are constantly working yourself every single second of every single day, you're going to lose that spark that made you love the thing in the first place. She's absolutely right about that. She seemed to be an advocate for Britney, someone who was telling her, you need some breaks. And then her dad saw that and was like, oh, this is someone who's threatening my control over this person, so she's gonna be gone. She's the problem. That was especially chilling. So then after that, Britney gets forcibly given a mental health exam and she fails it and she gets forcibly put into a treatment facility. Mainly, according to the book, it's because they found energy supplements in her purse during a dance rehearsal, and she says that apparently she wasn't wasn't allowed to have energy supplements, but she felt like she needed them because she was working so hard. And they were like, ooh, that's a drug. You're not allowed to have that. You now have to go to rehab, which is wild that her dad's controlling all of this when he's still an alcoholic at this point. But anyway, so Britney goes to rehab and it says, the doctors took me away from my kids and my dogs and my house. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't drive a car. I had to give blood weekly. I couldn't take a bath in private. I couldn't shut the door to my room. I was watched even when I was changing. I had to go to sleep at 9 p.m. They supervised me watching TV from 8 to 9 o'clock in bed. I had to be up every morning at 8. I had endless meetings every day. For several hours a day, I sat in a chair receiving mandatory therapy. I spent the time in between meetings staring out the window, watching cars pull up and drive away. So many cars bringing in so many therapists and security guards, doctors, and nurses. What I think did the most damage to me was watching all of those people coming and going while I was prevented from leaving. So she was literally in prison. The therapist questioned me for hours and what seemed like every day, 7 days a week. For years I'd been on Prozac, but in the hospital they took me abruptly off it and put me on lithium, a dangerous drug that I did not want or need and that makes you extremely slow and lethargic. I felt my concept of time morph and I grew disoriented. This is one of the scariest parts in this book for me, and one of the scariest parts about what Britney went through. One of the things that scares me about the conservatorship concept and about the concept of forcibly institutionalizing people and things like that, I'm someone who's been through a lot of mental health issues. I have friends who have been through a lot of mental health issues. I've had friends who have spent weeks or more in mental hospitals before. The scariest thing about the situation is that it becomes a cycle that it becomes impossible to get out of. Once someone decides you are mentally unstable enough to not be reliable anymore, they can exploit that as far as they possibly want because you're not reliable anymore. So, oh, Britney, you're unstable. Well, the doctor says you need lithium. Now the lithium is making her lose her sense of time and place. It's making her lose her own perception of the world because they forcibly put her on that drug, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And now she is actually struggling to get by because they put her on a drug that makes that harder, because they were able to justify that by saying, well, you had a mental health issue in the first place. This is one of the most disgusting ways that people who have mental health issues are exploited and are treated as prisoners. I'm just absolutely disgusted by it. So then from there, Britney talks about her process of, going back to court, getting her own lawyer, getting the conservatorship dissolved, securing her own freedom. So at the start of chapter 45, she says, the first step towards securing my freedom was for people to begin to understand that I was still a real person, and I knew that I could do that by sharing more of my life on social media. I started trying on new clothes and modeling them on Instagram. I found it incredibly fun. Even though some people online thought it was odd, I didn't care. When you've been sexualized your whole life, it feels good to be in complete control of the wardrobe and the camera. That's one of the things I really hate as a criticism of Britney the most right now, is that a lot of people look at her Instagram and see she's doing silly dances, she's modeling outfits that are very revealing, and people are like, oh, she might still be insane. Is it okay that she is a free person with autonomy? Yes, because people with mental health issues still deserve the right to be free and autonomous humans. A lot of us have mental health issues in this world, and if we go about trying to police what people are allowed to do that isn't harming anyone else, just if they act in ways that we don't consider normal and we think that that means they need to be forcibly institutionalized or forcibly put under someone else's ownership, that's literally reinstating slavery. That is literally fascism. That the world is going to turn into an authoritarian nightmare if we allow that kind of stuff to happen. And the fact that Britney was breaking free of this is a huge step in the right direction. She says freedom means being goofy, silly, and having fun on social media. Freedom means taking a break from Instagram without people calling 911. Freedom means being able to make mistakes and learning from them. Freedom means I don't have to perform for anyone, on stage or off stage. Freedom means that I get to be as beautifully imperfect as everyone else, and freedom means the ability and the right to search for joy in my own way, on my own terms. And I couldn't agree more. Whether or not Britney is still having mental health troubles right now, that's her business, that's her own life, that's between her and her own doctors. That is not for us as the public to speculate on, and I think this memoir does a really great job of driving home the point that she is an individual person, she has her own wants and needs in her life, and they don't have to align with what the fans and the crowd wants and needs. She also does give a lot of thank yous to her fans for starting the Free Britney movement and for caring about her enough to drum up so much public knowledge of the situation and what was going on there. I think the comparison of Britney to Marilyn Monroe is especially apt here because Marilyn was someone who in her time was so speculated on regarding her mental health, regarding her personal life and things like that, and people trying to nail down every single move that she did. Is she okay? Is she not okay? She had many of her own mental health struggles. The ways that the press took that as drama and public consumption was ultimately detrimental to her. If Britney is our generation's version of Marilyn Monroe, the positive side is that Britney is still with us. She's still alive. And she has the chance to reclaim her story. She has the chance to tell her side of things and to have us listen. So I really do recommend Britney's book, The Woman in Me. There were parts of the writing that I thought could have been done a little bit better. There were parts where I felt like we were skipping around in time. We were missing some things here and there. But overall, I think it is worth it to hear the inner workings of what went on, especially in the conservatorship, especially in understanding how detrimental and how abusive these things can be to people. I think it's doing a lot in favor of furthering the discussion on mental health, understanding that even if you're going through a mental health struggle, you are still a person. You are still a person with your own perspective and your own autonomy in the world. Nobody gets to take who you are from you. Nobody gets to control your body. No one gets to force you to work for them, things like that. So I'm really glad that this whole situation has come to light and that Britney is now in the process of reclaiming her own life and doing things on her own terms going forward. If she does return to making more music, I will look forward to listening to it. And if she doesn't, then we have tons of wonderful music of hers from the past to listen to as much as we want, and I'm very grateful for that. So let me know your guys' thoughts on Britney's memoir in the comments below. I will see you guys again next week for another video, but in the meantime, listen to some Britney. Bye!